Hey y'all, where was God when my sister was dying of cancer? Or where was God when my parents were abusing me? Or where was God when my significant other sexually assaulted me? Or where was God when anything bad happened in my life? Because if He's so good and He wants me to follow Him, why did all this stuff happen to me? Sometimes I think to myself, why don't people just believe in Jesus? I mean, it's simple. It's easy to do, and at its biblical core, it is easy to do. And as much saying we Christians should make it harder than it needs to be. But it's also reminded me that not everyone has the same upbringing that I did. I've had a relatively easy life, for example. It is easy spiritual life. And it's not been perfect, but what I mean by that is, as far back as I can remember, to my great grandparents, because I knew them for the years on the earth. Though as far back as I can remember to them, they were Christian. They were Christ followers. And it's easy to follow something and be something when you're surrounded by people who understand it, by people who can teach you what it means. And it's also easy to understand when you've seen miracles yourself. And you can't explain it as anything other than that. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say that following Christ is somehow genetic. I mean, the better family you have, the better Christian family you have, the more chance you have of following Christ. No, I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying it's easier growing up with Christian people and for you to turn out Christian than having to do it from scratch, if that makes any sense. That's the beauty part of it, though. That's the that's the really beautiful part about it. Is sometimes people aren't ready, and God will pursue you to the very end of your life. God will pursue you until He physically can't anymore. That's not to say that anything is beyond His control. I mean, heck, if he wanted to, we could turn back time right now to the beginning of existence. But I don't think he's going to do that. Um, no, he'll pursue you until he physically can't anymore. Meaning that if he pursues you anymore, it would contradict with his holiness. If you were to turn me to Luke 20, oh no, sorry, Luke 16, 22 through 23. Luke 16, 23, 22 through 24. It was that the beggar died. Oh, background first of all. This is a parable story that Jesus told. It's in radiators, so that's Jesus telling the story of the rich man in Nazareth. And usually when it's a parable or a story that Jesus tells, I would say we don't know how much of it is metaphorical or not, or we don't know how much of it has been transferred into human language so we can understand. We don't know how much of it really to take, I don't want to say seriously, but at face value. We we don't know how much of it to take at face value. Normally I would say that, but something happened in the story that I think is very important. One of the main topics of this story, of this teaching, is heaven and hell. And when it's Jesus talking about heaven and hell, I say take it as seriously as you can. Because I don't think Jesus would use much heavy-handed metaphorical language or out there metaphorical language in describing heaven and hell without there being major truth to it indeed. So we see the rich man who's never given a name, he just called the rich man. We see the rich man and Lazarus that both died. We pick up in verse 22. So when that speaker died, being Lazarus, and was carried by the angel to Abraham's bosom, the rich man also died and was buried. Verse 23. And being tormented in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that I may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. Now, I want you all to catch something. In verse 24, the verse I just read, it says, he cried and asked Abraham for a drink of water and everything. But something you need to understand. He was in complete hopelessness. He was in agony. I see some people, and this still sad no matter what you call it, but I see some people talk about hopelessness and hopelessness in their lives. That's not hopelessness, with all due respect. This is complete hopelessness where this man is right now. He's in Hades, he's in death, he's in hell with no way of escaping, no possible way of turning his life around, no second chances. It's done. He died and he's in hell, and that's unfortunately all there's gonna be to it. So when it says he cried out, he made a sound that we couldn't even comprehend of. He made a sound in agony and in hopelessness that the best way I could describe it is more like a gnawing beat, and that's probably a long way off from describing it still. We won't know the true extent until we get to either heaven or we unfortunately get to hell. But why am I telling you this? Why am I spending so much time on this? On what's this man sounded like? Well, quite simply because hell is going to be uncomprehendable. I mean, it's going to be worse and more tragic and more hopeless and more agonizing than we can ever imagine. I mean, some of us think we're in hopelessness down here. As I said, that's not hopelessness. I sympathize with your situation, I do, but you still have time to turn your situation around. You still have time to come to Jesus. It was over for this man. So we see a couple things in these verses. Verse 23. He lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. We see from that I don't know how far it's going to go, but we see from that there is some kind of window that people in hell and people in heaven can see each other. That's made even more clear in verse 25. In verse 26. In verse 25, Abraham just reminds them of all the comforts he had, but Lazarus had evil things. But now he's comforted, and you are tormented. And verse 26 picks up like this. And besides all this, between us and you, there's a gulf. There's a great gulf, not just a gulf, great gulf, fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. Though we see, at least we can infer that in the past, there have been people who wanted to go and get the residents of Hades, the residents of hell, because they had compassion on them. And why wouldn't they? I mean, one of Christ's greatest teachings is compassion. So why wouldn't they be compassionate to these people in utter hopelessness and in utter agony? But Abraham said you can't. It's time for the people of God and the people who serve righteously, Lazarus most notably, to get their reward. It's not time for weeping. It's not time for sadness. It's a time of celebration because you're with Jesus now. Now, I think there's a twofold why God has it set up, why God has heaven and hell set up this way. First of all, I've already said it would contradict His holiness if He had anything to do with the residents of hell. But also, to me, this can be seen as an act of great mercy. Have you ever wanted something so bad and been told you can't have it, maybe by a parent or by a family member? This is God saying that, because He knows. Now, it's the final act of mercy and the final act of grace that He's going to give, but an act of mercy and grace nonetheless. He knows that if people just get a taste of heaven, if the people in Hades just get a taste